Today we look at a tank that you should never dismiss within World of Tanks console, and that is the strv 81, or basically there's a couple versions of this tank, but it is the Swedish Centurion, and there is a reason for this being such a great tank, and we're going to showcase that within a couple of gameplays here. And basically this tank, the key thing about it is that it has fantastic turret armor, it has really good gun depression, it has really good DPM, and you're able to just use it in so many different unique positions that you can use, and there is one on this map that is fantastic for this tank in particular, and we're going to showcase what that can do to the opponents that you'll be facing in those sort of positions, and also why this tank in this sort of position can be really beneficial for your team, and how you're going to be able to generate better results in general overall with this tank. Now, in a medium tank there are typically a few things that can go wrong, and that is typically if a light tank decides to YOLO you and comes around the side and becomes a real nuisance, and then you have to turn to them whilst then exposing yourself to a lot of other tanks. Alternatively, tank destroyers can be a massive problem for tanks like the strv 81 because you have armour that can usually bounce a few medium tank rounds, and you can bounce light tank rounds, and sometimes you'll be able to bounce some tank destroyers, but for the most part when a tank destroyer decides to lock onto you, you end up losing a decent chunk of your hit points, which is what nobody really wants within the game. So yeah, hopefully you guys don't end up getting taken out by a load of tank destroyers. Now you can see we've taken a few hits here, but we've managed to bounce 780 damage already within this game, which is obviously something that you'll be looking to do yourself if you are interested in picking up this tank, which I would recommend. It is a good one. Is it really overpowered on a tank that is going to just release inordinate amounts of damage from very little effort? No, but if you are a good player, or a player that is looking to become a better player and learn various different techniques of being able to essentially move around the battlefield, position yourself really well, and just be able to come up against tanks like the Paladin here and just outplay them using your gun depression, using your armour, using your turret armour, just basically use the tank's advantages to really hit it home and come out on top, then this tank is definitely perfect for that, because you have pretty much everything that you could possibly need in a tank that is a medium. And you can see here the view range of the tank. This is one of the key attributes of the strv 81, and that is because you can outspot so many people with this tank. And in this gameplay we showcase just how much resistance damage you can get, as well as having the fact that we reload so quickly that you can track opponents, you can get them into positions where they're going to feel like they are really under the cosh. And you can see we've managed to track the King Tiger here, which is really good. We can just put round after round into their side of their tank and basically shut them down. You know, there's not much that the Tiger could have done in that sort of scenario, and it means that we can come out on top on this flank, although be it our team have basically crumpled on the other flank, but we'll get into that later on. And now 1800 damage. We've been able to dish out that damage fairly easily and consistently. However, you know, when you come up against the opponents, I'm not going to write this tank into the skies, because you can bounce, and that is the kind of key weakness of the strv 81, is that if you don't pen all of your rounds, you can find yourself being penned very easily if you're in the open and not using a hold down position like you can see here, and then it can end up being bad for you. But we don't do that within this game, and so we're able to kind of progress and move and just be able to do something within the game to make sure that our team can kind of get away with it, can be able to just learn and basically adapt to the situation. Now we've dealt 3,800 combined damage within this result, which is a really good result. You know, there's nothing too there's not really been any real pressure from the opponents other than taking a couple of hits here and there, but that really doesn't matter too much, and we can kind of progress now onto trying to boost up those figures that we've currently got. And this is, I guess, where the tank comes into play, I guess, in the sort of games where you've got to redistribute yourself around the map and be able to deal the damage that you want to effectively to a lot of the opponents that you can. And you can see here the M41 Bulldog is out in the open, and that is not going to go very well when we've got a super accurate gun on the strv-81, which means we can pinpoint accurate or be very accurate on the tank that we need to, which is of course the Bulldog there. And you can see that on the move, the bloom of the tank is not necessarily too bad, so we can fire on the move with this tank. You can be very, very flexible. Flexibility usually pays off very well with in-world tanks, because you can move into positions where other tanks probably won't be able to. And you can see here we're able to hit the Tiger here on the move very easily, and we're going for the tracks here. We hit him once and again, and then try and get him again, and he actually gets tracked and we can take him out. It's so easy with this tank. Artillery almost gets us there, which could be one of the key weaknesses of the STRV, because you are basically a massive box, which artillery loves to sit there and just do their business on you. And unfortunately that kind of happens quite often with the STRV, because you are just that chunky hit points, and yeah, artillery loves focusing the chunky hit points, especially if you have 800 hit points left on your tank. Then it can be a very, very big problem. In this game we're just trying to get out the damage on the Tiger spot for our team, and if we can do that, then it can be really beneficial for us. And well, as we talk about artillery, we get taken out. Now, probably one of the most annoying and infuriating aspects of World of Tanks is when the artillery gets you. Yes, we were in the same sort of position. I'm not that surprised that the artillery got us. I knew that it was a risk, and there wasn't much we could have done there without actually negatively impacting the team, and unfortunately we do get taken out, but that's not really too much of a problem. And we'll skip ahead to the end of the game where we can see the result, and here you go. This is the defeat screen, and you can see that there was a few good players on the enemy team. The Tiger won there, managing to pick up 5 of our team, which is a bit disappointing, but we managed to pick up 2,700 damage, 3,709 assistance, and that really showcases how good the tank can be when you get it in the right position and you're able to use the view range of the tank as well as the DPM. And unfortunately we didn't have the best team, which meant that we ended up losing the game, and artillery didn't help whatsoever either. So let's move on to the next gameplay and showcase even more how this tank can do in a bit of a higher damage result. Now then, you may be thinking, well, this tank can do very well in a tier 8 game, but can it actually do well in a tier 10 game? Well, yes, the answer is in short, but this video or this game clip or this gameplay is going to actually showcase how you can do well in the tank, because trust me, the armor doesn't work anywhere near as effectively in a tier 10 game when you're coming up against those tier 10s that have just that high penetration where they can go through the turret armor of this tank. And so you have to change your style and and adapt to the play that you're actually able to make between the different kind of gameplays and different matchups that you're coming up against, because as with all games within World of Tanks, you can't just pick one and then suddenly you're going to be the best player in the world. The difference between being a good player, being a great player, is being able to adapt to the situation, know when you should be pushing, know when you should be adapting your own playstyle to the opponents that you're going to come up against. And this tank does very well when you can have, when you've got that ability locked down. Have I done that perfectly throughout the history of me playing World of Tanks? Absolutely not. But after playing so many games, I've kind of learned that you can adapt your playstyle and what sort of things you need to be keeping an eye out for. And so what you want to be doing is making sure that you're just being a little bit of a nuisance to the opponents. You can see this T-32 getting a little bit cocky, or at least he's just trying to feather that shot onto us, and because he does that, he loses a nice chunk of hit points because he overexposed himself, and that is something you definitely don't want to do in the STRV, because you're predominantly very good on ridge lines. If you expose the hull armor of your tank, you will get penned all of the time, and the hull armor is I guess one of the key weak points. If you've ever played any of the British medium tanks, you'll know exactly what I mean by the armor on the hull, where this very big and boxy, maybe not the FE4202 because that is a slightly lower profile tank that has a little bit more of a slim hull, and so you can actually bounce around. However, if you play the Action X or any of the Centurion 7/1, any of those sort of tanks, you'll know exactly what I mean by just being a big box of hit points that the opponents can chunk away. But in the strv-81, what you can do to be able to like maximize the damage and just be a little bit like of an aggressive tank is just making sure that you're using the ridge lines like we're doing here, spotting opponents using the fantastic view range. Don't know how we bounced off the T32 there, but hey ho, for some reason we did. But we won't make the same mistake, and we'll actually go for the full-on weak spot of the T32 turret being the back left-hand corner or the back right-hand corner, wherever you can see it. As long as it's on the side of the tank, the back end of the side is really where it is very, very weak, and so that's what we go for. And then you can see here we're able to just get rounds into the tanks that have pushed very aggressively onto the hill, and this is where this spot in particular is very, very good. Is it always very good? Well, it depends if you've got teammates on the hill. If you've got no one on the hill to be able to spot for you, then it can't be as good. And so you end up like being basically trying to outspot opponents that are going to be on the hill, which doesn't usually end up fantastically because, yeah, eventually you do get spotted, or maybe you don't have the view range in a tier 10 game to be able to do that. But with this tank, we definitely have good view range, so it wouldn't really be that much of a problem. But what we're doing now is just picking opportunistic shots when we can get vision, when we're not going to be able to get spotted. And you can see here we're not actually spotted at all, and now we're just pinpointing rounds using the superb accuracy into the weak points of the various tanks that we come up against. For example, the 705A side of the turret there can be easily penned with the premium rounds. Probably not so much if we were firing the standard rounds, coming back to the point in the first video where sometimes you do actually have to fire premium with this tank, but because you are a premium and you make a ton of credits with this, if you have a good result, it doesn't really matter too much. And so don't feel like you have to only fire standard rounds in this, because you will make your money back if you do load some of those premium rounds, which I do recommend. Don't just spam them, because there's no need for the majority of opponents, but things like the Pershing, where they got the turret buff, can actually be a little bit annoying to actually go through. As you can see, we're kind of struggling here, and I don't really want to be able to just try and aim at the cupola, because we can always bounce off of that. And now you're just seeing us plough the rounds into the turret of the Pershing as he decides to kind of use the ridgeline as well. But we are the tank that actually has armour on the turret. So yeah, as I say that, you know, the Objects 279E actually bounces off of our turret, which I guess showcases exactly what this tank can do. You know, it's basically a very aggressive ridgeline warrior, and you have to play it like that. You can't go all in against opponents like on the flat, because it just won't work. You're not going to be able to do that consistently, and you're not going to be able to perform as you probably want to if you are doing that, because there's just frankly better tanks that can fight in an all-in engagement on the flat than this tank can, and for some reason the Pershing decides he's now going to try and go all in against us. Don't quite know why, but we'll put rounds into his cupola very nicely, as you see the weak point like we talked about earlier, which now we can actually hit easily, because it is the only area of the Pershing that we can actually hit. So, you know, these are all of the things you have to think about in a tank like the STRV, but if you can lock that down, you can have these games where you just come out really, really well on top, even in tier 10 games, which is of course what this is. But be mindful of TDs, because they will blast your turret into smithereens, so don't go thinking that you're going to be able to just bounce everything and not have to worry, because you will in some scenarios. But against things like the Object 279E that's side on and doesn't really have his armour, and just where you wait your shots until you can actually pen, you know, you're going to do very well with this tank, so don't worry about that. But just make sure that what you're doing is just not being too aggressive. Take your opportunities when you can. In these tier 10 games I'm on about, if you're in a tier 8, you can pretty much just come up against most things, albeit you don't want to go all in against like an ISU 152 or ISU 152K or any of these super high penetration round TDs. Don't go sitting in front of them, is what I mean. You know, your turret can probably bounce a few of their rounds, but don't push it too far, and you'll do very well with this tank. And I think that most people don't realise that this tank can actually perform, and it really is a tank that I've always underestimated. I thought, you know, yeah, it's just another Centurion that's going to be pretty mediocre, you know, it's not going to be able to be like one of the superb tanks that you're going to be able to do really, really well in. But it is. It genuinely is. This tank can do fantastic, and I think people underestimate that, and that is why I wanted to do this video and showcase why you really don't want to be underestimating it, and maybe potentially why you might want to pick it up, because trust me, this tank will be able to perform for you, and it teaches you a lot. It will teach you a lot within the game, and I guess what it won't teach you is not to just YOLO tier 10s, even though like you should actually aim properly, and remember that over the back of your tank you don't get the gun depression that you want, so don't do that. And yeah, basically Titan, stop being an idiot, and then you'll do better and you won't have lost half your hit points. But regardless of that, let's just pop in the 4.5 second reload of 240 damage into these opponents, and be able to basically farm their hit points, and just remove the rest of the T28 prototypes hit points, and maybe we can get the final damaging hit on him. No, we don't, but what we can do is just wait here, try and track the Object 279E, who's for some reason focusing the tier 8 medium instead of the people surrounding him, and now we can just sit here and try and go for the weak points of the 279E. We don't have any premium left, which is probably a disadvantage. Maybe you want to take a little bit more premium than I do, but that's completely down to you and whether you want to spend the money on it. But yeah, as soon as he turns, we can then just put rounds into him, and using the accuracy, it's not going to be a problem for us to continually put rounds into him. And yeah, now he turns for us, but no matter, we manage to shut him down, and we get a little bit more assistance damage at the end. And the strv-81, a really good underrated tank that I think doesn't get enough attention, and I want to bring it to your attention. Playing not necessarily the most overpowered tanks can still be really fun, and this tank is one of them. And I want to say a massive thank you to Fat Little Bernie for actually donating this tank, or gifting me this tank to be able to review for you guys. It is a massive pleasure, and thank you very much for all of the support he's given me through these last couple of days. He's been able to gift me silver, and it's really appreciated. Trust me, it helps me out so much with the videos, and I can't thank you enough. And just thank you to anyone else who's watching this video as well for keeping the support up and being able to kind of allow me to make these videos for you guys that are hopefully informative. If you did like the video, make sure to like it, because it helps me out once again and it doesn't cost you anything. And yeah, thank you, and I hope you join me in the next one. Goodbye.